Sometimes life puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we don't understand why. For 51-year-old ER nurse Patricia Santos in Phoenix, Arizona, that place was Trauma Bay 7 on a sweltering Thursday night in August 2024. The unconscious young man brought in after a motorcycle accident had no identification, no emergency contacts, and no one to speak for him except the medical team fighting to save his life. But when Patricia looked at his face under the harsh hospital lights, she saw something that made her question everything she believed about coincidence, destiny, and the children we're forced to let go. Patricia Santos had spent 26 years in emergency medicine, the last 15 as head nurse at Banner University Medical Center in Phoenix. At 51, she was respected by doctors, trusted by residents, and known throughout the hospital for her calm competence during the most chaotic situations. Her colleagues would often joke that Patricia could handle anything: multiple traumas, difficult families, 12-hour shifts that stretched into 14. What they didn't know was that Patricia's steady hands and reassuring voice masked a heart that had been broken 26 years ago in this very hospital. Back then, she'd been Patricia Mendoza, a 25-year-old nursing student working the night shift to pay for school. She'd been young, unmarried, and 8 months pregnant when she'd made the most difficult decision of her life. The baby's father, Miguel, had been a fellow student who'd disappeared when she told him about the pregnancy. Patricia's parents in Tucson had been devastated, traditional Mexican Catholics who loved their daughter but couldn't understand her choices. With no family support and no financial means to raise a child while finishing nursing school, Patricia had made the heart-wrenching decision to place her son for adoption. She'd chosen a couple from Scottsdale, David and Jennifer Martinez, who seemed perfect. He was a high school principal, she was a teacher. They'd promised photos and letters, an open adoption where Patricia could watch her son grow from a distance. But after the first year, the letters stopped coming. The photos ceased. Patricia's requests for contact went unanswered, and eventually she'd been forced to accept that her son was living a life she would never be part of. So Patricia had buried her grief in her work. She'd become the nurse who stayed late with worried families, who held hands with patients who had no one else. She'd married David Santos, a kind paramedic who understood her dedication to helping others, even if he never knew the full reason behind it. They'd tried to have children, but after several miscarriages, they'd accepted that their family would be just the two of them. Thursday, August 15th, had been a brutal shift. Phoenix was experiencing record-breaking heat, 118 degrees, and the emergency room was packed with heat exhaustion cases, dehydration, and the usual accidents that come with extreme weather. Patricia had been on her feet for 10 hours when the paramedics burst through the doors at 11:47 p.m. 25-year-old male, motorcycle versus semi on I-10, called out Jake Morrison, one of the paramedics. Unconscious at the scene, possible traumatic brain injury, broken ribs, internal bleeding suspected. No ID, no emergency contacts. Patricia immediately shifted into trauma mode. The young man was covered in road rash, his motorcycle leathers cut away by the paramedics. His helmet had been removed at the scene. It had saved his life, but split completely in half from the impact. As the trauma team worked around him, Patricia focused on getting IV access and monitoring his vitals. It was when Dr. Sarah Chen stepped back to review the x-rays that Patricia got her first clear look at the patient's face. Even swollen and bruised from the accident, there was something familiar about his features. The shape of his nose, the way his dark hair curled at the temples, the strong jawline that reminded her of someone she used to know. "Miguel," she whispered, thinking of the young man who'd fathered her child 26 years ago. But that was impossible. Miguel would be in his 50s now, and this patient was clearly in his 20s. As Patricia cleaned the patient's wounds, her hands began to tremble slightly. The young man had a small scar on his chin, the kind from childhood stitches. On his left shoulder was a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. Patricia's breath caught in her throat because she remembered that birthmark. She remembered kissing it goodbye 26 years ago in the maternity ward 3 floors above. Patricia knew she had to be professional, but her mind was racing. The patient's estimated age fit perfectly. He appeared to be in his mid-20s. His features, now that she looked closely, were a mix of her own delicate bone structure and Miguel's stronger jaw. The birthmark was unmistakable, but Patricia needed proof before she could even consider the possibility that the unconscious young man in Trauma Bay 7 might be the son she'd given birth to in this same hospital 26 years ago. She waited until the trauma team had stabilized him and moved him to the ICU before she made her move. Patricia's husband David was working the night shift for the fire department, so she called him during her break. "David, I need you to run a license plate for me," she said, her voice carefully controlled. It's for a patient situation." David had been a paramedic for 20 years. He understood that sometimes you needed to bend the rules to help people. The motorcycle license plate had been run by police at the scene, and David was able to get her the information. The bike was registered to Michael D. Martinez of Scottsdale, Arizona, born August 15, 1999, 25 years old today. It was his birthday. Martinez, the same last name as his adoptive parents. Michael, the name Patricia had always imagined calling her son, though she'd never told the adoptive parents her preference. And his birthday, August 15th, the same day she'd given birth to him 26 years ago. Patricia knew she was crossing ethical lines, but she couldn't stop herself. During her lunch break, she accessed the hospital's patient information system. Michael Martinez had been a patient here twice before, once for a broken arm at age 8, and once for appendicitis at 16. The emergency contact listed was Jennifer Martinez, with a Scottsdale phone number. His insurance was through the Scottsdale Unified School District. Jennifer Martinez, the adoptive mother. And if she worked for the school district, that explained why the letters had stopped. David, the adoptive father, had been a principal. Patricia remembered now that they'd mentioned wanting to give their adopted son a fresh start with no reminders of his birth family. But the final piece of evidence came when Patricia noticed something in Michael's personal effects bag. Among his wallet, keys, and phone was a small, worn leather bracelet with a single silver charm, a crescent moon. Patricia's knees nearly gave out. She had made that bracelet herself during her pregnancy, working on it during long study sessions. She'd tied it around her newborn son's tiny wrist in the hospital, hoping he would always carry a piece of her love with him. Michael remained unconscious for 3 days. Patricia found herself volunteering for extra shifts, always finding reasons to check on the ICU. She watched his monitors, adjusted his pillows, and spoke softly to him when no one was around. "Come on, mijo," she would whisper in Spanish, using the endearment she'd never been able to say to him before. "You're strong. You're a fighter. I can see it in you." It was Dr. Chen who finally questioned Patricia's unusual attention to this particular patient. "Patricia, you've been spending a lot of time with the motorcycle accident victim. Is there something I should know?" Patricia made a decision that could have cost her job. I think he might be my son, the son I placed for adoption 26 years ago." She explained the birthmark, the age, the name, the bracelet. Dr. Chen listened without judgment. "Patricia," Dr. Chen said quietly, "if that's true, then he's incredibly lucky you were here when he needed you most. But we need to be careful about boundaries until we know for sure." On the 3rd day, Michael's brain swelling began to reduce. The neurosurgeon was optimistic about his recovery, but warned that when he woke up, he might be confused and disoriented. Patricia made sure she was there when his eyes finally opened. Michael's eyes opened slowly on Saturday morning. Patricia was checking his IV when she noticed his eyelids fluttering. "Michael," she said softly, "can you hear me?" His voice was hoarse from the breathing tube. Where am I?" "You're at Banner University Medical Center. You were in a motorcycle accident, but you're going to be okay. I'm Patricia, one of your nurses." Over the next few hours, as Michael became more alert, Patricia learned pieces of his story. He was a teacher at a middle school in Tempe, just like his adoptive mother had been. He loved motorcycles, played guitar, and was single. When Patricia asked about his family, his expression grew complicated. "My parents we're not really close," Michael admitted. "They're good people, but I always felt like something was missing. Like there was this part of my story they didn't want me to know about." Patricia's hands stilled on his chart. "What do you mean?" "Opening, I was adopted," Michael said, looking directly at her. "And I've always wondered about my birth mother. My parents said she was young, that she couldn't take care of me. But I used to imagine what she was like. whether she ever thought about me. Patricia had to step out of the room. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and cried for the first time in years. All those nights wondering if her son was happy, healthy, loved. All those years imagining what he looked like, what kind of person he'd become. And here he was, grown into a kind, thoughtful man who taught children and thought about others. When Patricia returned to the room, Michael was looking at the crescent moon bracelet on his wrist. "This is weird," he said. "I've had this bracelet my whole life, but I never knew where it came from. My mom, my adoptive mom, said it was with me when they got me from the hospital." Patricia's heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment she'd dreamed about and feared for 26 years. "Michael," she said, her voice barely steady, "what if I told you that your birth mother never stopped thinking about you? What if I told you she became a nurse because she wanted to help people the way she wished she could have helped you?" Michael looked at her more carefully, really looked at her. Patricia saw the moment when he noticed her eyes, the same unusual shade of green as his own. When he saw the way her hands shook slightly, the way she was fighting back tears. "Are you—" Michael's voice broke. "Are you my birth mother?" Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I gave birth to you in this hospital 26 years ago today. It's your birthday, mijo. You were born on August 15th, 1999, at 3:47 in the morning. You weighed 6 pounds, 4 ounces. You had a full head of dark hair and the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen." Michael stared at her for a long moment, then looked down at the bracelet on his wrist. "You made this, didn't you?" "I worked on it during my pregnancy. I wanted you to have something from me, something that would carry my love even if I couldn't be there to give it to you myself." What happened next surprised them both. Instead of anger or confusion, Michael felt a sense of completeness he'd never experienced before. "I used to have dreams," he said quietly. "Dreams about a woman with kind hands who sang to me in Spanish. Was that a memory?" Patricia gasped. "I sang to you every night when you were in my womb. Arroró mi niño. It was my grandmother's lullaby." Michael struggled to sit up in his hospital bed and reached for Patricia's hand. "I never stopped hoping I'd find you," he whispered, "and you were here the whole time, taking care of people just like you took care of me." The reunion wasn't without its complications. Jennifer and David Martinez, Michael's adoptive parents, were initially shocked and somewhat defensive when they learned about Patricia's identity. But over time, they came to appreciate the woman who had given their son life and who had been instrumental in saving it again. Patricia and her husband David welcomed Michael into their lives gradually and respectfully. They learned about his childhood, his education, his dreams. Michael, in turn, got to know the woman who had sacrificed everything to give him a chance at a better life. The experience changed Patricia's approach to her work as well. She began volunteering with adoption support groups, helping other birth mothers navigate their feelings of loss and hope. Her story became a source of inspiration for families touched by adoption. For Michael, finding Patricia answered questions he'd carried his entire life. He understood now why he'd always felt drawn to helping others, why he'd chosen to become a teacher. The compassion and selflessness he'd inherited from his birth mother had shaped his character in ways he'd never realized. Today, 18 months after the accident that brought them together, Patricia and Michael have built a beautiful relationship. He calls her Patricia, but signs his cards, "Your son, Michael." She attends his school events and celebrates holidays with both his adoptive family and his new extended family. Michael made a full recovery from his injuries and returned to teaching. He often tells his students that sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected experiences. Patricia returned to her work in the ER, but now she works with a deeper understanding of how profoundly our lives can intersect in ways we never see coming. Some people call it coincidence. Others call it destiny. But Patricia and Michael prefer to call it love. The kind of love that transcends time, distance, and circumstances. Have you ever experienced a moment when the universe seemed to bring you exactly what you needed? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more incredible true stories of family, hope, and second chances. Next week, we'll share the story of a woman who discovered a shocking truth about her inheritance that changed everything she thought she knew about her past.